Marx is a film by Russian director Svetlana Boskova. She's best known to lovers of art house cinema, but her latest offering, about Russian trade unions, hits a pressing issue in the country. Her choice of subject is of great interest to Russians, as trade unions have been going through a revival 20 years after the collapse of the Soviet Union.
For me, the unions are a symbol of the desire that people have to defend their dignity. Even if they're unable to do something, they still have that desire. So they're willing to risk everything, their stability and so on. In my opinion, this is the only institution in which one can believe.
After the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991, trade unions lived in a so-called dark decade. Membership fell dramatically, and they were unable to defend the rights of workers as they didn't have a functional central state or legal system. Unpaid wages were a common practice that caused widespread protests across the country. Today, Russian trade unionism is reborn. The number of independent unions is growing. There is a new generation of leaders, and workers pay more and more attention to their rights. The NPRA is one of the most militant unions in Russia. Founded in 2006, today it has 4,000 members in several industrialized areas. In the city of Kaluga, the union is coordinated by Dmitry Kozhnev. He explains the birth of the new unions.
In the Soviet Union, things worked very differently. There was no confrontation between the employer and the worker. Unions were in fact a state structure which were busy with social programs, paid holidays, distributing places in nurseries, providing apartments. Anything you want except fighting for workers' rights. Today we have capitalism with all the consequences that follow, including the class war.
From the moment it was founded, the NPRA quickly became associated with strikes. They soon saw the owners of many car factories backing down in disputes. The most recent NPRA-led strike took place in April against the Bentele automotive factory, which produces parts for companies such as Peugeot and Volkswagen. Bentele's management refused to enter into negotiations, so for 3 days workers and members of the NPRA halted production, causing among other things a shortage of spare parts to the neighbouring Volkswagen factory. Despite threats to use force, the management finally gave in and accepted the negotiations. Unlike the NPRA activists who enjoyed immunity during the actions, Denis, a simple worker and union member, was not so lucky. After participating in the strike, he was fired about a month later for taking a day off work, despite having a medical certificate.
The head of security at the factory asked me if I was a member of the NPRA. I guessed that he was encouraging me to leave, in which case all would be well for me. If I did not, I would have problems. We shook hands and we parted. Then he called me the next day and asked me to sign a deed certifying a day of absence. I was fired for contempt of rules, but actually for a single day of absence.
Denis filed a complaint asking to be rehired with the help of an NPRA lawyer. He feels he has a good chance of winning, and if he does, he's promised to become more involved with the organization. Members of the NPRA say pressure is increasing. Dmitry tells us that local police have attempted to force members to provide information on the leaders of the organization. The new law on rallies may also further complicate union activity, including gatherings during a strike. The NPRA and other unions are described as alternative unions, but there still exists so-called traditional unions like the FNPR, an institution born out of the Trade Union Federation of the Soviet era. The FNPR is in Moscow, where there is an impressive museum of Russian trade unionism harking back to its pre-revolutionary days. Today, the FNPR claims to have more than 20 million members on its books. Founded in 1990, it now unites 95% of Russian unions. The head of the federation, Mikhail Shmakov, spoke of how the union has had to adapt over the years.
We're not abandoning our traditions and our history, which began not in 1917 but long before, in the late 19th century. However, we must recognize that today things are different and unions are different, and the relationship is a triad of public power, employer and union.
Striking is not the preferred method of the FNPR, and some criticize the fact that its leadership has too often been too close to those in power. Shmakov even enjoyed beer with politicians at a recent demonstration in Moscow.
The arrival of the highest state officials at the May 1st demonstration shows, I think, that unions are very influential in our country. When the President and the Prime Minister come to us and say, "We're with you, we share your concerns," it gives us strength to criticize even them. We push them to make good decisions.
No matter who the unions are, the problems they face are the same. Despite an improvement in conditions at the turn of the century, including the adoption of a new labour code in 2002, they still lack the mechanisms to force employers to respect workers' rights. In 2009, Vladimir Putin was forced to intervene in the city of Pikalevo near St. Petersburg to end a riot caused by a conflict at a local factory. An expert at the Center for Workers' Rights in Moscow told us of some of the main difficulties for unions today.
Первое. Трудно организовать профсоюз.
Firstly, it's very difficult to organize a union. There are hundreds of examples where employers learn that workers want to form a union and so begin to pressure them, threaten them. Secondly, when a union is created, it's very difficult to negotiate. Since the legislative procedure is not very fair in the sense that the employer can torpedo it.
But what do the employers think about the role the state should play in facilitating social dialogue? Fyodor Prokopov is a professor at the Moscow School of Economics and a member of the Tripartite Commission of Trade Unions, Employers and Government. This year the commission, created during the time of Yeltsin, turns 20.
The state should create a legal framework, developing such laws of such quality that they allow the economy to grow. And together they form a system that can defend the worker and not cause the growth of unemployment.
The alternative trade unions within the Russian Labour Confederation participate actively in the international labour movement. Boris Kravchenko came to Geneva to attend the annual International Labour Conference. His confederation filed a complaint at the conference on non-fulfillment by Russia of the right to organise in open meetings. But it is the offensive at European level on workers' rights that is the biggest concern.
We see very curious things in this session. The employers have tried to challenge the basic right of workers to strike, as is already the case in Russia. This is very significant, in my opinion. It's a direct consequence of the economic and financial crisis we are experiencing today. Employers are trying to solve the problem of declining profits by increasing exploitation.
The Russian trade union movement today is moving away from its Soviet Union past. As some Russian analysts point out, political democracy is impossible without democracy in the workplace.